Good afternoon. My name's Hunter Manning, and this is my submission for mind map number 3. And I just want to preface before we get into this video that I'm actually talking with a broken voice right now. This past weekend I did a lot of yelling, so I actually lost my voice. So please just bear with me throughout this video. Thank you. Okay, so the first of the 4 readings we had for this week was by Hole and Carusi. And so this reading was looking at how technology is able to change how we see the world, not just what we see. And they build on Merleau-Ponty's idea that perception is actually tied to the body, and they argue that scientific instruments, things like microscopes or sensors, they can actually become part of the body when we use them. So it's not like we're just holding a tool, but we're seeing through it, and that shapes how we actually understand the world. In this reading, they used a example of a blind man and his cane to demonstrate their point. And in this, the blind man's cane is actually becoming an extension of his body. So obviously the man can't use his eyes. So the cane kind of takes over that purpose and becomes an extension of his body that allows him to see the world. And for me, I immediately thought of pole vaulting. I mean, I don't have a perfect example of that's related to the blind man and the cane, but I pole vaulted up for my entire high school career. And I remember when I first used the pole, it was kind of cumbersome, it was really a really unnatural movement, and running down a runway holding a really long pole is not an easy thing to do. And it kind of hits at what Hole and Carusi are trying to say is the more we use them, the more they become ingrained in who we are and by extension how we see the world. And I proposed this in our group meeting actually, at which point do we actually did the tools that we're using actually become an extension of our body? That was one thing I was kind of confused on this reading, and I think my group mates had a good answer for it, and the answer is we don't. There's not really a specific point where they actually become an extension of us. It's kind of like becoming conscious when you're a child. You can't really pinpoint a single moment in time where you became sentient. Rather, when you zoom out and look at the long-term path you took, you realize that this tool has become an extension of us. And so when I look back, I couldn't remember the exact moment when the pole began to feel natural for me, but when I remember my senior year of pole vaulting, it was like secondhand nature running down the runway with that pole. So I thought that was a pretty cool relation to this reading in my personal life. Alright, so the second of the 4 readings for this mind map was by Baudrillard, and I thought this was the most difficult of the 4 readings. It was certainly the most abstract in my opinion, which made it kind of hard for me to draw real-world examples from my personal life. And the way my mind works, I need to have as many examples as possible, so this one kind of made it hard for me to do that, so I'm afraid I didn't have the best grasp on this one. But from my understanding, Baudrillard's whole thing is that we're living in a world of simulations. And in this world, we are around copies of things that don't even have a real original anymore. And he says this leads to what he calls a hyper-reality, where the fake version actually becomes more real than the real thing. It's like when people post perfect versions of themselves online. It feels more authentic than the actual life, even though it's all staged and none of it is real. And the one example I was able to think of is actually kind of silly. So on TikTok right now, there's a bunch of videos that are AI generated, and they're videos of a Yeti and a gorilla that are like, I guess they're brothers, and they're out in the wilderness camping. And in these videos, they're just wandering through the woods and having conversations like normal humans would do. But it's completely made by AI. The animals, they're not real. The voices are fake, and the whole thing is artificially generated. But people still watch it like it's a documentary. The comments, they are just in awe of these videos. And that's exactly what Baudrillard is warning about. We're getting to a point where we can't tell what's real, and honestly, sometimes we don't even care, is what it seems like. The simulation becomes more entertaining than the truth, and that's kind of scary when you think about where that could lead in the future. And the third reading for this mind map was by Clark and Chalmers. And in this one, they're arguing that our minds don't actually stop at our skulls. And kind of the basis of this, they reject the traditional idea of the skin and skull idea. And that entire concept revolves around our mind being what's contained within our skin and skulls, and it doesn't really extend beyond our body. And so they go into thinking that if we use something like a notebook or a phone consistently enough to think and remember things, then that tool can actually become part of our mind. It's not cheating, it's kind of just how the thinking works, according to them. If we're already used to relying on things outside of ourselves to think clearly, they feel that these things should, and can be considered part of our own mind. And one thing that I thought was pretty interesting about this reading is the idea that actual other people could be part of your own mind. And that one was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. So obviously I tried to find an example of it. And I had found some success in dermatology. So I was a medical assistant at a dermatology clinic last summer and the summer before. And a common theme among a lot of elderly men is that they need their wives or significant other to come in and remember the things for them. So when I seat the patient and I start getting their medical history, a lot of times I end up just asking their significant other or whoever's there with them, because most of the time they can't remember it as well as the person that they brought with them can. So I think this example kind of stuck with me because it just shows how thinking isn't always solo. It can be shared and extended in places that you wouldn't traditionally think, and especially it can be shared outside of your body. All right, so let's move on to the last reading for this mind map and the last reading for this semester. This reading by Bostrom is all about post-humanity, which is pretty much a state of humanity that's after our current one, where we have the potential to become much better than our current state. In this, Bostrom's making a case that we should actually want to become post-human, meaning we become smarter, healthier, and longer living versions of ourselves. He says using technology to improve ourselves isn't necessarily unnatural. It's actually just the next step in human progress. We already take medicine, wear glasses, and use apps to help us think and live better. So why not go further? Even those ideas in themselves, like glasses and nootropics, they are, by extension, post-humanity from a certain point. So you take early 1900s, before lots of nootropics were available to help you think. That could be considered a state of post-humanity if you think about it. So in this, he's pretty much arguing that we shouldn't let fear stop us from embracing change that could actually make life better. So as I mentioned, I worked in a dermatology clinic throughout my life. And one part of the dermatology clinic where I'm at is we see a lot of elderly patients. And so by extension, I experience a lot of memory problems, or I interact with a lot of patients with memory problems. And by extension, dementia. A lot of the times it develops into a state of dementia or Alzheimer's. And so this reading kind of made me think about memory enhancement as my primary real world example. So imagine someone who's caring for a loved one with dementia, and they actually start forgetting who their family is, who their friends are, and who they were as a person. Now imagine we had a way to actually safely preserve or even boost the memory using something like gene therapy or implants. That wouldn't really be losing our humanity, would it? I think it would be more like holding on to the parts that actually matter most. And this reading by Bostrom kind of helped me see that these post-human abilities don't necessarily have to be about becoming robots. They could be about protecting and extending what makes life meaningful. And finally, I just wanted to take a second to thank you for listening to me ramble on throughout these group meetings and these videos. I appreciate your feedback a lot, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.